Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Poirier, and I'm here to present my Missional Helix project on the area of co-working. So, as we get started, we kind of want to take an opportunity to just get some signposts and see where we're actually going and how we're going to get there. So, as we've learned throughout the course of this class, the missional helix is this process that's more of a cycle, if you will, where it's something that can be done over and over again as we look at a context and address different areas where we may be able to apply missiology, basically. So we'll start with theological reflection, looking back to the Bible and seeing where there's different types of things that apply to what we're going to talk about. We'll then move on to a cultural analysis, which is the situation as it currently is in the culture, in the context that I'm looking to apply. Then we'll look at historical perspectives to see where we came from to get to where we are today and how this particular missional option might look going forward. And then finally, strategic formation, which is kind of combining all these different pieces so we can understand what the best process might look like for us to make something missional in a context so we can apply the gospel to everyday people. And that's, of course, where we're then going to put kind of a conclusion in an application where we'll actually see the missional practice played out. So before we really get into the pieces that we've been talking about, I want to kind of give everybody an idea of what co-working is, because some of us might not actually know what co-working is and actually looks like and feels like. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, you can see that co-working is the use of an office or other working environment by people who are self-employed or working for different employers, typically as to share equipment, ideas, and knowledge. So as I like to break it down, it's someplace that you can pay a very minimum amount of money, a membership, if you will, to have at a minimum a desk space. But some places offer offices, meeting spaces. They all offer things like a free kitchen that are stocked with coffee. And they also offer things like mentoring programs and people to teach you how to do business if you're starting a new company or just how to get better at things. But the four main areas that you can kind of think of what a co-working space truly is that it's a place to work, a place for people to learn and grow. It's also a place for some of these people to actually express who they are. It's why they started their own company. It's why they're focusing on some of these pieces. So it's a place for them to be oneself. And then finally, a lot of these places are also glued together by goals and visions and mission statements that actually set that organization out to help others or to serve a community. The bottom line is it becomes a cost-effective location for people who either don't have a physical office space, can't afford a physical office space, to actually come together in community with one another, with other people that are in very similar circumstances, such as trying to start a new company or expand their company, or simply to learn enough to be able to get to the point of launching a company. So it solves that problem of having to pay for office space or working out of your home, which sometimes can be distracting for some people. But the bottom line is it becomes this community, this location, usually in an urban center, where folks can go to get all these different needs of their business life taken care of. Right off the bat, that place to work, a place to learn, a place to really be who they are and grow, and a place that can help others. So that's co-working in a nutshell, so we can kind of keep that in context while we move through the rest of the presentation. So the first section of the missional helix that we'll look at and try to apply some of the concepts that we've already heard about co-working is going to be here in theological reflection. And there are two primary things that I want us to look at, and that's God's design, that we were designed for community, and God's design, that we were designed to be missional. So as we can see right off the top, we have Genesis 2:18. Then the Lord said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." So right there we see that as soon as he had created Adam in the garden, not soon afterwards, he realized that Adam should not be alone. So right from the beginning, we are designed with this innate desire, this innate reality that we need to be with other people. We move on to Leviticus in Leviticus 26:12. "And I will walk among you and will be your God, and you shall be my people." So not only did he say that we shouldn't be alone, and he created us a helper and someone to be with us, but he himself reminds us the reality that he wants to walk in community with us. And it becomes even bigger than that, because it's not just that he walks with us and that he created us a helper, but that we should have a heart for one another. And in Matthew 22:35 through 40, usually what we call the Great Commandment, we see this next aspect. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. The teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So we're supposed to love one another. So again, we see this continuation of truly building with one another, that we must be in community and love one another. And finally, John 15:12, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So all of these pieces kind of point to this reality of we were never intended to be alone, but together and to love one another. So I see this as community. And that's one of the major pieces of what co-working really is, even to people in a secular sense. So next we come to God's design, that we're designed to be missional. So right off the top, Genesis again, 12:1 through 3, this is Abraham's call. Now the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So right from the beginning, we see God pushing us onto mission, pushing us onto the field. That all the way back to Genesis, we don't even get to the Great Commission. But for today's conversation, we do get to the Great Commission. So we can see the bookends of the reality that God created us for a missional sense. In Matthew 28:18 through 20, as we all well know, and Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you to the end of the age. So we're familiar with this passage, and we know that that's what places us as Christians onto the path. Another place we can look to see this is John 20:21. Jesus said to them again, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you. This is even a bigger impact, because it's not just that God sends us out to be missional, but God sent his only Son, Christ, onto the mission field, who then turned around to send us. So he's not just a God that sends, he's also a God that goes. And finally, we see Acts 1:8, spread of the gospel section, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. So it's not just that he sent us, and that we saw that even from the beginning of creation, he created us with that intention of sending, in that he goes himself, but that we will continue to spread the gospel onward and onward. So there's a good theological basis for why this type of thing might work, because we see inherently that we have been created for that purpose of community and being sent missionally. So let's take a look at the cultural analysis. I'm focusing on Raleigh, North Carolina, and so let's look at why co-working would work here. First of all, there's roughly about 7,000 people that live in the urban area. In the next 4 years, we're going to see that increase to 17,000. The average age is between 25 and 44, almost 50% of everyone there. There's going to be an increase of about 40,000 plus jobs. And a lot of this is being centrified on gentrification projects that are all over the place. So these urban renewal, these locations for people to live, are constantly popping up. We're in an academic city, so there's lots of forethought, lots of people thinking about what they want to do next, creating businesses and everything. And we see this just in the lower data, that we're the number 2 best large city to live in. We're the number 2 city creating most tech jobs, and we're the number 1 hotspot for tech startups outside of Silicon Valley. So we've literally been starting to be called the Silicon Valley of the East. So this is where you see that entrepreneurial spirit of people wanting to create their own companies, but not having money to start buying physical infrastructure, having places to work. So this is why co-working, this is the core demographic, almost to a T, of what these types of people are looking for. And all this information came from the Downtown Raleigh Alliance. It comes from a cross-section of different areas. And we see it from census data, we see it from some of their background that they've done, but all of this points us towards this perfect situation of the perfect age group that's typically looking to be in community. These are your millennials that don't want to go into their normal office. They're looking for that place to grow with one another. So what does the culture look like in general in terms of looking at what co-working in general is going through right now? It's a fairly new concept, but it's growing at a massive rate. So there's almost 7,000 locations worldwide, but there's only 13 here in Raleigh. And actually some of those are split between spaces that aren't just co-working. They're a combination of businesses. If you were to bring it all the way down to just co-working, it's only 6. But this year in 2016, Forbes tells us that co-working is going to explode like it has never done before. It's becoming more niche, which is good because for what I'm going to say at the end of this presentation is we should aim for a particular niche that is faith-based. They're going multi-site, which just like churches, if a good brand comes forward in the co-working space, they then are turning around and creating other sites under the same name. Some sites are going super large scale as well, and this is a new concept that's kind of interesting. Because right now, some of them are pretty small. You can see from some of the pictures, they're small, but some are going to the size of like some of our mega churches. They're also going into business of offering more and more services other than just a physical space. But probably the big thing for us to focus on is there's also corporate partnerships, which could also be read church partnerships. And then some places are also becoming holistic communities that have things like gyms and other stuff. So they're going beyond the concept of just work. So what does that mean for us in terms of where we've come from, in terms of how we've gotten here? Our historical perspectives for us to consider in looking at this are twofold. And that's number one, changes in where we live and changes in how we work. So as a country, we came from the mid-1800s to a movement of moving towards cities. And this has a lot to do with the change in work that we had, where we were mostly an agrarian society. So when the Industrial Revolution began and the mid-1900s came along, we started a huge movement of people going to cities for skilled work and skilled labors. So when that occurred, we then had another flip in the mid-1900s where people moved back to the suburbs. And then as industrial growth started to wane and technology-based, service-based technology started to grow 1900s to 2000s, we saw people starting to flock back towards the city. And that's exactly what we're seeing today, where a transformation of the urban and suburban centers are, even suburban areas are becoming more urbanized in general. So when you overlay that with the way that things have worked, they're all directly related. That wherever the business is, wherever people can continue to make money, is typically where the people are locating to. So what we're seeing with the younger generations is, and technology, and more of a service-based instead of a vocational-based reality, we see people either turning their suburbs into urban centers because they're looking for places that they can walk to, they don't have to drive to or commute to anymore, or they're moving back into the urban center so they can go to those gentrification locations and literally have the place they work, the place they sleep, the place they eat, the place they work out. Everything is within a few walking distance of one another. And so that leads us into, so why is this important? Well, the strategic formation that we have left is that God's design and cultural need are overlapping. So we see that God has placed us in community with one another, and that God has placed us in this situation to be missional. And we can see how a lot of these things directly overlap with people's needs in terms of having a place to work, a place to learn and grow. These are all community issues. Or a place to be oneself, also community. And then finally, a place to help others. So a place to be missional, to send, to go out. So we can see that all of these things in terms of God's creation and design overlap directly with the need of who we need to be. And that pretty much puts us to what we're actually talking about, and that's going to be the co-working as a solution in terms of contextualization. And we have a great model that we can follow in what's called the Ocean Accelerator, which is a faith-based think tank and co-working space in Cincinnati, Ohio. So in terms of having that community, they've created community for one another. They've also provided that need of having that co-working space, but they bake in biblical gospel discipleship directly into everything they do. They partner with churches and corporate sponsors so that they have both the church piece going on, but they also have the final pieces of gospel discipleship, secular overlap of learning about business and companies, and it's a great model for us to look at. So we'll finish up in the final section